So as we cleared our last session on Thursday, we mentioned that an AU, anyone know what the AU acronym stands for? And I'll give you a hint, it has to do with the Windows file system. Allocation unit. Allocation unit in Linux and Macs, the file system breaks down disk sectors into units, logical units called inodes. In Windows, it's an allocation unit. You can only ever store one data file in an allocation unit. So if a large allocation unit is provisioned when you are preparing, you're initializing a physical hard disk to add partitions and then format for use. Basically, the logical unit of measure that's overlaid on top of the physical disk sectors in the Linux and Mac world is referred to as an inode. And in Windows, it's called an allocation unit. If you have a very small data file and you have a large allocation unit, you have a lot of empty space. And hackers use specialty tools and methods to store smaller chunks of data in the empty slack space. The term slack is intentional. That is exactly what it means. It's slack space in an allocation unit, and hackers love that, right? So you want to make sure that your forensic tools used for the incident handling assessment, and now you're not going to do a whole lot of analysis, but you're doing quick assessment and capturing. You're preserving digital evidence. There are 3 important requirements to preserve for any data stored in a file on a disk. The actual data contained by the type of file, because many file types are containers. So they may be, we refer generically to documents from the old days when the first applications were word processors. And so you actually have data inside the file, and then you have application-related metadata, such as GPS tags, the login account that created it, transaction information, and so on, like when the last time it was modified. That's what we mean by transaction information. File system criteria used to start on the disk, like the path and the file name, and of course, other attributes that the file system references, such as date created, last modified, read-only permissions, encryption permissions, compressed, and so on, okay? We were talking about the last group, so I did go back and re-record a portion of our last session. I had my wires crossed, but essentially you have 5 levels of data that you engage in incident handling. And the first 2 require specialty resources or resources that have been pre-positioned, so to speak. That means they're running in the system tray, like an EnCase client that's running down here. Yes, open source tools can lay hold of some of this. The only problem being when you load those tools into an actively running system, when you load that forensic application, it takes up RAM, and it may displace some other data that is currently stored in RAM. So group 1 and group 2 are the most volatile, right? So when we're talking about active memory dumps, we're talking about the stuff that's stored in RAM, where this is the stuff between RAM all the way to the CPU and on the CPU, right? And then, so that is the part of the recording that we updated and revised from last Thursday. The swap file contents, this is temporary. This is the gold mine we were talking about. It's stored temporarily in quickly accessible disk memory. So it's a temporary store of active memory. So when you're multitasking on a system, a lot of times when there's malicious stuff going on, the CPU is overloaded, the memory is maxed out, the disk drive activity is going to beat the band like a Christmas set of Christmas tree lights just blinking like crazy. The upstream traffic on the network interface is like a fire hose. All this stuff is going on. What's happening is that it's working in overtime. A zombie system is like an enslaved client of a bot herder. You may have heard these terms, and these things are actually a reality in some corners of the world, unfortunately. I did post some academic material about how bots spread and how a Trojan horse can lead to infect an entire local area network. It's out there on academia.com, I think. And it was cited, at the time it was cited for academic excellence. It's a little dated, but it's a great diagram if you get the time to look it up under my last name on academia.com. In any case, when you're storing temporary content from RAM, while it is multitasking like a wild man, it is this third level or group 3 of data that we want to be sure we capture from a running system if at all possible, right? So it's a juggling act, and the operating system is juggling lots of content, and there's a lot of malicious or nefarious stuff that's temporarily stored on the disk. When you shut the system down and you restart the system, a lot of times it's purged or emptied. And there are methods to capture this data in most operating systems. They're simple commands. You have to run with elevated privileges as long as you have access to those. This is a most common starting point if you are called in on a scenario that's already running and you don't have EnCase in the system tray. This is one of those areas where you can really capture a lot of information during an incident while it's live, while it's happening. And this is part of live acquisition. So we were talking about live acquisition as opposed to static acquisition. The thing that we want you to distinguish is that there's a tipping point. The first two groups require specialty resources most commonly or routinely in order to be effective. And that's part of live acquisition. So is group 3, live acquisition, right? But then we get to static. We get to the next level or group of data, right? Oh, okay, so capture of flash memory data. We did mention 3D crosspoint, right? Didn't we say it's kind of like a hybrid between RAM and solid state disk? And we don't have system architecture that's yet designed to revise and update the classic John von Neumann computer architecture model, where you have RAM on one side of the CPU, on the north side bridge. Everybody remembers this, right? The fast memory, direct memory access, DMA. You have RAM on one side, and then you have very high performance peripherals like video and that kind of stuff. And then on the other side of this, you have the south bridge, right? So that has to do with I/O, unless you have a dedicated RAID controller or a high-speed specialty disk interface or controller, disk controller on the north side bus. Most often, disk I/O happens across the south side bus, right? All of that may go out the window soon. So you may be called upon as an incident handler with new devices and new systems if hardware manufacturers find a way to innovate this where they just use 3D crosspoint or Optane, right? Works as fast as RAM, but it's persistent like disk. Why do we need the John von Neumann model again? So I am presaging or predicting that sometime in the not too distant future, we may see some innovations in computer architecture that require a distinction among tech professionals, computer science and computer engineering professionals, and also digital forensics specialists, right? including incident handlers. Whole disk and partition image captures are data acquisition tasks that are routinely performed after the live acquisition is completed. Now, what that means and why that's highlighted important in green is many times we just collect the hard drives. During the live acquisition, after we capture the data that we can during the live scenario, when we reach a tipping point, if we're not, if the system can be powered down effectively or properly, we collect the whole system or the disk from the system, right? Which gets us to the static acquisition. So groups 1 through 3 are live, groups 4 and 5 are static, generically speaking. Now, does that mean you can't perform an image capture of a whole disk on a live system? You can. If you have the right kind of scenario, if you're working on a Linux system and there's the DD command available, you can capture live the contents of a disk on a live system. So I don't want you to think in terms of absolutes here. Whole disk partition or image captures can happen in a live scenario. It's just time consuming. You have to have a data capture volume. You have to have a physical disk that's large enough to capture the entire contents of the entire system that you're working on. And if that system happens to be like a latest, greatest high-powered workstation with 2 terabytes of data in there, you're going to need a 4 terabyte NAS or something like, you're going to need one whopper of an external drive or a connected network disk in order to be able to capture the entire thing. And quite frankly, that's not always possible. One of the things about incident handling is that you're supposed to preserve the digital evidence, but you also have to balance the disruption to the operations of the organization. If you go in there guns blazing hot and you decide to commandeer the network, the systems, so that you can do your God-given job, and you beat everybody over the head with your credentials and your certifications, and you basically take over the joint, you may end up creating a lot of needless cavitation to the organization. You can do a disservice to the profession because people think these are cowboys, man. They come in here and they take over the place. We don't need that. We don't want that. I don't know if we're going to have budget next year to afford their services. Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Incident handling is a different dynamic. Incident handling means you're preserving the digital evidence, but it also means you're balancing the interest of the operations. If you do something that is so disruptive that everything comes to a screeching halt for mission critical services and resources or systems in an organization, you're going to have advanced permission and blessing and authorization from the leadership of that organization documented up front, or it can be a career-changing event itself, and not one that's very positive to your career progression. I hope I'm making myself abundantly clear about incident handling here. All right. Same thing with ethical hacking, right? You're talking to somebody who was certified in ethical hacking. All right, so remember that when we get to whole disk partition and image capture, if you're on a system that has a smaller hard disk and it's not completely full, you can do it with a network drive or an external drive with the right connectivity, and it can be a part of the live dynamic. But in general, because you're incident handlers, it might make more sense to have like the tech staff that you're partnering with to swap out a live spare in that office, a sterile, secured, locked down spare. If you don't have hot spares in an IT environment to use for incident handling purposes or for digital forensics, you are vacant. You're asleep at the switch. You are not doing your job. You should have live hot spares available as an IT staff. I'm not talking about incident handling here. I'm just talking about common sense. You want disruptions and system remedies to be quick and painless. And it doesn't take a whole lot of cash or cheddar to line that up with the powers that be so that you can quickly transition. You forklift the stuff out of there and you continue with the static acquisition at your leisure at a slower pace so fewer mistakes are made. This is one thing that you want to advocate up front with your IT partners. And I use that term very deliberately. You want your IT staff trained in aspects, even certified in incident handling, but you want them to understand those tipping points and what to do when you engage a scenario that requires that kind of thing. I know I've been dumping a whole lot of scenario-based detail here in the mix on the screen based on the information and material presented. Are there any questions or comments or observations to share at this point? Let's unmute your mics one at a time and just can tell me yeah, no, wow, something. Let's start with Sulaiman.
Morning. Yeah, I don't have anything at the moment.
Okay. Sulaiman, do you have like a very large external hard disk in case you need to jump? And of course, you're not, you know, you're not operating as a digital forensics expert at this point, but do you have a large external hard drive that's basically empty if you needed to do like a whole disk capture as a courtesy for someone? Just asking. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask each of you, do you have like a spare 2 terabyte drive laying around, 4 terabyte external drive laying around?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, that's good news. You ever use it for backups?
Hard disk as a backup? No, but I have an SSD that I usually use for backups.
Yeah, external, so occasional backups are a great like baseline. We've talked about baselines before, haven't we? You have a backup
Yes.
from a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago, last year. Those are great things to store in a cabinet somewhere, and you're saying, why should I spend the money to have a 1-year backup from a year ago? Because it's a great baseline. Things can happen over the span of a year or longer than a year, where a baseline is useful because you have a point of comparison, right? You can restore a system back to its original state after you capture its current state and kind of check the deltas. That comes later in the digital forensic analysis. But in any case, all right. So Luke, your turn. Do you have any questions, comments? Do you have an external hard drive?
I don't have any questions so far, and yes, I do have an external. It's 1 terabyte.
Okay, and have you backed up your system recently?
I have not.
Okay, just asking. Kareem. Kareem.
No, I don't have any questions. And I do not have an external hard drive.
Okay. Well, everybody's budget is different, and depending on the clients that you're using, it may not make any sense to have a terabyte disk just laying around because you happen to have 100 extra bucks or something. You can get them for a lot less on Amazon, but by the time they ship here, you know, shipping and handling and so on. Thank you, Kareem. Jadel, can you unmute your mic, please? I will mute mine. Go ahead, Jadel.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no questions. I also have a 4 terabyte external hard drive. And no, I have not backed up my computer recently.
Thank you, Jadel. Okay, if you could mute your mic again, that would be great. Because otherwise we're going to get really screechy really quick. All right, so let's talk about backups for a second. Suppose you are an incident handler responding to a ransomware scenario. I know that the earlier versions of Windows 10 did not include this measure, but I am going to bring this up in the system security class on Wednesday. If you would, and you have Windows 10, I'd like you to follow along with me on your screen in Windows 10 because I want to see if the latest feature update of Windows 10 also includes this new innovation or if it's only Windows 11. If we go to settings, everybody with me? Tell me if you need a second to get to system settings. I want everybody on the same screen because I'm actually going to tag out stop sharing and ask you to share your screen. Yeah, each of you, right? Okay. So I know we've been off to a slow start this season with regard to some of the academic content, but I did promise that there would be a lot more hands-on, right? And that there would be more interactive, right? And that you'd have some virtual systems you could blow up, right? All that kind of stuff, okay? So coming soon to screens near you, all that. But we start in your neighborhood, right? So here under system, they put recovery and reset stuff. I think in Windows 10, it might be under privacy and security. I'm not sure.
In Windows 10, it is...
In earlier versions of Windows 10, it may have been in a different place. It's in
No,
updates.
it's still under recovery.
It's under updates and security or up. Yeah, it's called updates and security, not privacy and security.
Yeah, update and security.
Yeah, but under system generically. All right, so was that Sulaiman that was making a comment? What was your comment?
I was saying that the system recovery, the recovery option is still under its own thing.
Oh, it is.
10.
Yeah.
It's in updates and security under here, which on Windows 11 became privacy and security. And when you go to privacy and security. So here's the neat coolness factor here. If you go fishing in here, and then you go to, I think it's might be device security or virus and threat. Let's everybody go into virus, right? And yeah, you don't always scroll down. Oh. What is this? Oh.
Yeah, we have that.
Oh. What's interesting here is, you have that in Windows 10?
Yeah. Ransomware protection? Yeah, we have that.
I'm not sure in the early versions of Windows 10 and the earliest versions of Windows 10. Now remember, Windows 10 has been around since late 15, early 16. Windows 10 rolled out in 2016, somewhere on that range. Could be off a little bit, but yeah. Okay, so how many years? 2016 to 2023? Yeah, 7 years. Yeah. And of course, some people can't roll up to Windows 11 because of the hardware constraints imposed by Windows 11. But you're saying that you see this screen in Windows 10.
Yep.
And it says controlled folder access?
Controlled folder access.
Okay.
Ransom data recovery, and at the top it says ransomware protection.
So why are we calling this out? Well, this is how many people are aware and use this feature. Now, yeah, I don't know that a whole lot of people are aware that it's there in the first place, and even fewer use it. I will say this. It says set up OneDrive for file recovery options in case of a ransomware attack. Now, there are two scenarios where one would use OneDrive, and I'm going to talk about this in the next group or level. So we're going to do a deeper dive here. But the thing that is counterintuitive about OneDrive is that if you have it configured so that it's open and on all the time and ransomware hits, ransomware is going to generically start to spread from the local disks to the cloud disks. They're just gonna, it's just another disk. It's another disk. If it's open and active and accessible all the time, and the same permissions are set on the cloud, in the cloud, and locally on a disk is a disk is a disk. Okay. Ransomware can saw right through the local and jump into the cloud and just encrypt everything. And that has happened. But what's interesting here is that you have this option in the virus and threat protection. And if you click into this, you can set up controlled folder access. Now, the interesting piece of this is in our system security class, in the very next module, we're going to afflict or instruct our students to make use of a best practice known as role-based access control. And if it's properly implemented, it can stop ransomware from spreading cold, but only if the inheritance and privileges and permissions are finely tuned and configured as a best practice. I am shocked to see so many IT installations in organizations everywhere that do not do this. So what am I saying? The seniors in systems security are going to do a deep dive on how to work the best practice to basically stop the onslaught of a ransomware attack. Now, controlled folder access seems to be like a magic easy button, I'm guessing here. Protect files, folders, and memory areas on your device from unauthorized changes by unfriendly applications. If you are not practicing as an IT professional, the implementation of role-based access control as a policy, protocol, defined practice, best practice, and so on, then this feature could be helpful. But it could also be a pain in the neck for incident handlers who are basically trying to do what? They're getting on a system, and with elevated privileges, what are they trying to do? They are trying to lay hold of data. Incident handlers are supposed to preserve the digital record. So what do we have here? New feature, new function. How does it work? Remember our mantra? Validate, verify, certify, authenticate, all that kind of stuff, right? You need to be able to prove it. So if you are on a hunt and search mission for damaged data, any data, digital evidence in an incident, and you run across a system that does use this or engage this, how exactly does your incident handling protocol change as a result? Well, this is something that we need to research. This is fertile ground for, I'm just saying, students and faculty and cybersecurity professionals everywhere to research and document. Because in the incident handling realm, you could have some extra wrinkles. If your controlled folder access is working in a certain manner, whether it's exploited or not, you come sawing into the picture hot as an incident handler, and you're not aware that this is like in play. Are you sure you're getting all your data? Well, if it's a whole disk capture, the short answer is yeah. If it's a whole disk capture on a system that's powered off, yeah, you should get everything. But what if it's a live acquisition and you're making assumptions to grab something in real time before it changes, before it's encrypted, before there's a mistake or something bad happens? Yes. Now I'm going to revise. What am I saying? We have an addendum for this module. I'm going to revise this addendum, module 3 addendum, to include the very screen we're talking about here. And what I'd like to do this summer is compare some lighthearted, well, to conduct some lighthearted research to compare the how controlled folder access is implemented, what that means, how it works compared to other scenarios where best practices for a standard IT department of certified IT professionals performing RBAC works, especially with ransomware situations, right? So we could simulate ransomware access and what would happen by tagging a file. It could be as simple as changing an archive bit that isn't supposed to be changed. And if we can do that, well, then the ransomware would work. Ransomware data recovery. Set up OneDrive for file recovery options in case of ransomware attack. Everybody read with me. Repite usted, por favor. Set up OneDrive for file recovery options in case of a ransomware attack. Now, what would this imply? We're not using OneDrive as our solitary storage of personal data anymore, are we? No. Yes, you had a question.
But the thing is, for me, I currently have OneDrive set up this computer for that.
Okay, you need to, did everybody hear that remark by Jadel? Jadel, unmute your mic and make that comment again.
I currently have OneDrive set up on this computer for that.
Yes, many people do. And what I would tell you is that, again, this might be an easy button for implementing OneDrive access in what we would call like offline mode or lagged copy mode. So what you're doing is in here under your operating system, you're configuring OneDrive to only synchronize, only connect, only be open, only be available and accessible to the local system when you tell it to work like that. When you want to store a latest copy of data or files or whatever in the cloud. So it's kind of like a on-off switch. And when this is off, the ransomware cannot make the leap into OneDrive to munch and crunch your stuff. It's a more informed manner of backup. That's another way to look at this, okay?
How would I be able to turn off OneDrive from that?
Well, so there are options. So the question was asked and Jadel asked, how do you turn off OneDrive so that it isn't always open? And essentially it's usually running in the system tray. And so what I'm going to do is stop sharing and I'm going to ask Jadel to share his screen and I'm going to ask him to right click the OneDrive that's floating in his system tray. Everybody ready? It's a great question. So there you are. And if you click it or right click it, yeah, there we go. Settings. So where is it? Something about
Left click instead of right click. The cloud button, left click it.
yeah.
Go to settings from there. Then quit OneDrive or pause syncing.
Well, that's yeah. Quit. Oh no. There's one other option. If you quit OneDrive, that quits OneDrive in real time. But if you reboot your system, there's another setting where it automatically loads and it's active when Windows starts up. That's the feature that I'm looking for. And it used to be right there. So go back to settings again. And it has something to do with being active when Windows starts. Pause syncing when the device is on a, no. All right, let's fish this out because it used to be a very simple switch. You turn it off, you say, oh, I don't want it active. That's what I did on mine. I said, yeah, I don't want it active when I start Windows.
You think it would be this?
Yeah, let's look, because it's changed. Okay, backup folders on this device in OneDrive. Okay, but if that's real-time backup and you contract a case of ransomware, right? That's not what we talk about. Yeah, so maybe it is pausing, and then there's an option to say, don't do it all the time, or it could be an account. So pause syncing. Oh, there we go. So 2 hours, 8 hours, 24 hours, or quit OneDrive. But that, I'm guessing if you reboot, it's just going to come right back up again. Let's go back into settings again. Let's look in the account option. Maybe it's tied to the account option. So lock the personal vault when you're not actively using it. Okay, so that sounds like an option that has, I don't know if that's, yeah, that is associated with OneDrive settings. So you set up a personal vault. The personal vault is an area of your OneDrive that's encrypted, I think. And if somebody gets a hold of it, they can't read it, I believe. Choose folders you choose will be available on this PC. There we go. Ah, okay. So these are the things that are synced automatically into your OneDrive. So what you could do is uncheck the box and then say, okay. And then now you quit OneDrive. Now let me show you what you do next. And this is what I do. And once again, we're going to repeat some of this information for our system security people. Quit OneDrive, yeah. Yeah, close the OneDrive. Okay, so what I want to know is whether or not after you reboot your system, OneDrive is blinking at you again. Because there used to be a simple setting that said, and it might be in control panel or they've changed settings. Maybe they've made it a registry hack so that it's not as easy to get to. But here's what I'd rather you do right this second. So OneDrive is not around at this time, right? So in theory, you should not be able to drag and drop something into OneDrive, right? What do you do when you're ready to save something in OneDrive? And it's important to keep a lagged copy of an important document or data set in your OneDrive. Well, you go to Office 365, log into Office 365, pull up OneDrive in your browser, right? So open up your Edge browser. I like Edge because it's Microsoft and it's designed by the same people that design OneDrive. And I know that sounds goofy, but go into Office 365 if you would, please, right? Yep. And so we are demonstrating a point that will become painfully obvious in group 5 or level 5 of your static acquisition. Okay, so if you go to the apps in the upper left corner, there we go, and you select OneDrive. Now you're accessing OneDrive through the browser, and you can upload or download files manually. Oh, that's such a drag, manually. Is it? Because if it's automatic and you get hit with ransomware, what happens? It's like a buzz sound, a buzzsaw sound. You know, it's when all your files just get, you know, encrypted and shredded, and then somebody goes, "You owe me $2,500. No, $25,000. No, $250,000. If you want to ever see your data again," right? This is a reality that hits some people. Worse than ransomware is somebody getting in your Kool-Aid, figuring out what your bank login is, and draining you dry. Far worse. Destroying your reputation. Far worse. Or the reputation of your organization. Far worse. So what am I saying? I work with OneDrive offline all the time. Now, what I'd like Jadel to do, if you could humor me, Jadel, we're going to ask Jadel, since he's such a good egg in demonstrating all this, he has changed a setting in OneDrive. I wonder if are settings online that also tie to the user profile on the local machine. Yeah, not really. I mean, not those kind of settings. Oh, okay. Look at view the Microsoft account and see if there's something in there. And let's just check to see if there's an option in there about automatic startup, storage, OneDrive, get more storage, privacy, security, keep your tools safe online. So you could check the security option there. Protect your account. That has to do with your Microsoft 365 account, I guess. That's more to the point. All right. Microsoft storage. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to ask Jadel if he would mind closing all his screens, gracefully exiting, restarting his laptop, and then sharing the screen the moment he gets back in without closing anything to see if OneDrive is still blinking in the system tray after we used that method. I want you to shut down all the way, and then we'll see what happens. And depending on how long it takes for him to boot his machine, we'll find out in a moment. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And while he is rebooting, I want you to be painfully aware of newer, later, greater things that come along, right? That become interesting. So here's virus and protection settings, right? Real-time protection from malware, cloud delivered protection, automatic sample submission, right? Oh, submit a sample manually, right? That's a nice feature. If it's working, then there's device security, core isolation. This is kind of fascinating, right? So if you get into here, you'll find out that you can turn on a feature that, and I keep turning this on and it says it's off. Maybe it has to be professional edition in order for this to be engaged. I don't know, but I keep turning, you see it's turned on and it says local security authority protection is off. Your device may be vulnerable. What is that? You can't load unsigned drivers plug-in from loading into the local security authority. So Jadel is in there. I'm going to stop sharing. We'll get back to that in a moment. Go ahead and share, Jadel, your screen before you get to the system tray. And I'm going to ask you to state in front of the class that you have not, what do we see in the system tray sitting there? Do we see like a red slash? So it's synchronized.
Yep.
Okay.
Isn't such a thing.
So once again, folks, this is something to research if you're interested in enhancing system security. And it sounds like the ransomware protection option is designed to incorporate features and functionality similar to the offline store or lagged store that we've done in previous years, instinctively or otherwise. We're not going to go fishing for the option to turn it off when Windows boots, but I'm pretty sure it's still in there somewhere, and it might be, at this stage, a registry hack. I don't know. Thank you, Jadel. Send me an email about OneDrive, automatic startup, and then just in the body of the message, say classroom demo. And if you would, join me in a short round of golf clap to thank Jadel for being a willing victim and sharing his screen. Yay, Jadel, thank you very much. Okay. All right, so let's get back into this. There we are. So yes, hold disk, partition image capture. Group 5, alternate stores of critical data, right? So what's happened is that a lot of very famous applications are restructuring their software as a subscription. And it's an online subscription, and the stores are where? In the cloud, and you have to pay them for so much storage in the cloud. And examples of this include Adobe or AutoCAD, right? So I'm talking about subscription basis for the software. And in order to access some of your stuff, guess what? You may need to maintain your subscription under certain circumstances, right? The big $64,000 question is, do you as an incident handler have access to your own applications that would enable you to lay hold of those cloud or online options? You may recall from our earlier module that a minimum equipment baseline for a forensic laboratory included a disconnected workstation with which to conduct your forensic analysis, but also in the same room, a research workstation that is connected to the internet where you can do research, okay? And this is where sometimes unholy amounts of additional time and energy and effort have to be accommodated, especially when you get to things like, I don't know, a paywall, because your knucklehead, the victim or knucklehead employee, the subject of investigation, the alleged perpetrator, has done things like park their junk in a Dropbox with protected access. Oh, and there's encryption. And to make matters worse, there's a paywall. Many times the terms and conditions for a cloud storage service may or may not include the option for forensic professionals and or law enforcement to access your data. But the fine print in the end user license agreement, hello, has anyone ever heard of a EULA end user license agreement? This takes a lot of time. Static acquisition can play out over the course of days, even weeks, depending on what you're trying to get a hold of, and the hurdles or barriers in the way. This was not a reality so much for us just 10 years ago, or 7 years ago, or 5 years ago. But the huge trend in internet service providers and application publishers is to embrace the cloud, and that has profound implications for incident handlers. Okay, now we've already talked about app data where you have like email box stuff in there. So this is something that should be a bit of a refresher, or it should jog some, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I remember this. We were talking about that before. Malicious exploits, right? Taint the operating system in the kernel level. So sometimes the task manager looks like it's not doing anything, but you see the drive light going crazy, and the task manager shows the drive light is only doing so much.
I think you called it a phantom screen.
Well, it's a fake screen.
Yeah, no, sorry, dummy screen. Yeah.
It's a dummy screen, and some kernel level exploits will falsify or report false information to these screens because they're operating on such a low level in the operating system. They've infected the kernel of the operating system. And what's the tell? Well, your drive light is going crazy. Your network is very slow, and everyone else on the network is smooth, fast, and hot. I mean, there are some very obvious telltale signs, and this is where empirical observation, right? Objective empirical observation is critical. So what to do? Again, this is the tipping point between live and static acquisition. Your only option to collect data may be to power everything off and work offline, right? But the whole alternate stores of critical data also include things like, I don't know, external hard drives that are disconnected, USB thumb drives, network stores that are not engaged, right? You don't have an active map when you're logged in, or it's a spontaneous, it's not always because of difficulty in the situation. It could be that a reliable network share, access to a reliable network share isn't happening like it's supposed to. So the connection to a network store on across a network, a local area network, using UNC or other, named resources on a network. The point is that locally across a network or in the cloud, out on the internet, you can kind of lump alternate stores of critical data into all of the above, right? So when we say alternate stores of critical data, we are not just talking about the cloud. We are also talking about cases where some stores are actually across the network. You could have a hacker that loves to drop little Easter eggs on directories on other systems using the administrative hidden share. Does anyone know what the administrative hidden share is? Does anyone know what the administrative hidden share is?
No.
Okay, especially in a domain environment, when you have a computer account in the domain environment and you have a disk drive, were you aware that each of these physical disks on my laptop, if I was part of a domain, that there's actually an administrative share? So if I know the IP address of Zorg, right? So I'm connected right now. Here's what I can do. And this is kind of scary as all get out. I'm going to do this. Okay. Everybody with me? So I'm using an IP address of 146.226.197.162. Now I'm going to simulate how the administrative network share works and how hackers love to store little Easter eggs on other systems in a domain environment when they have elevated privileges. This is scary as hell. So I have 146.226. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this, and then I'm going to press Control C, and the highlight's going to disappear, which means that value is stored in memory. Then I'm going to simulate that I'm on another machine. I will attempt to connect to myself. Okay, everybody with me so far? Everybody see data sitting here, right? That's actually the first logical volume of a 2 terabyte physical disk. But I'm going to pick on data for a second. So everybody remember D. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to map a network drive. Everybody with me? So let's say I have administrative privileges in a domain environment and I map a network drive. If this doesn't scare the feces out of your sluggish colon, I don't know what is. So let's pretend that I'm sitting on a local network and I do this. And I paste the IP address of a client sitting there and I have elevated privileges and I do this. $sign to what? The D drive. And let's pretend that because I have elevated privileges, I am capable of connecting with domain administrative privileges or worse, enterprise admin privileges, or just local admin privileges. And I want to make sure that I put in my password when I do this because I have an account. It's a rogue account. I know the password. I click finish. Oh, okay then. Now, what is my account on this? I want to do this right, okay? What is my account on here officially? tckentop@gmail.com, I think, all right? Now let's presume that I'm using an administrative, right? Oh, and this is Zorg, all right? So let's pretend that I have this illicit account. in the domain environment. So we're just pretending here. And then I use tckentop@gmail.com. And maybe there's a local account name for this, right? Oh, let's check one more thing. Let's go to the control panel and see what it's called in here under users, because I don't want this to misfire. T Christian space Kentop, right? So if I yeah, I think that's what it is. I could try T Christian space Kentop, but usually spaces cause problems. So I'm going to use that. Okay. And that's the irritating part about what's happened in the last few years is that third-party accounts can actually be local accounts. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my password. What is my password when I'm logging in? So again, let's pretend that I have a rogue privileged account in a domain environment. Okay, specified network password is not correct. So what is the name of my system? Is it that I've misspelled the name of the system? This should work. All right, well, I'm going to figure out exactly what's going on here, but essentially in a domain environment, if the login for the domain and the login credential for the password worked, what would happen is that I'd have a drive map direct to the root of the D drive. So each of the disks has a hidden administrative share that's based on the drive letter, and it's hidden with a $sign. And all I have to do is this, okay? I'm going to take this off and just see if my current login will connect. Oh, my current login credentials were used as opposed to an alternative, right? So if I was sitting across the network, I could enter my domain credentials, but here we go. Do you see here, I have, let's make sure that we're in the same D drive, right? I'm going to go ahead and pull properties on the 7 directories. It's 5.01 gigabytes, 498.366, right? Everybody with me? Okay, now let's see if I'm really on the D drive. Oh, 7 directories. What are the properties on this? Oh yeah, 5.01 gigabytes, 498.366, right? So I am literally connected. If I had your IP address and I knew something about your system, I could do the same, right? So why are we sharing this with you? I want you to be aware in this particular case, group 5 or level 5, alternate stores of critical data, the static acquisition, that can be extensive, especially if you're in a domain networked environment. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? If you are in a business or organization where you have computer accounts in the domain and it's used by users, I did share with you some days ago that anybody that has a user account in the domain can log on to any computer in the domain just by entering their login credentials, unless certain restrictions are applied. I did demonstrate that previously, didn't I? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought so. And the point I'm trying to make there is, holy buckets. Yeah, it's even worse if somebody ends up with domain admin credentials or enterprise admin credentials through a process of elevation and stuff. So yeah, once again, whether you're in a domain environment, at a corporate environment, and you're dealing with the possibilities of alternate stores on other systems or other network shares, You really have to have a pretty good bead on the details of that user profile. What am I saying? You have to take some time to investigate what are their interests, what are they into, what kind of data files are they storing? Are they storing graphic images? Are they storing video clips? Are they storing emails? Or, you know, is it databases that they're storing? And then you go on a fishing expedition in other systems on other screens where the alleged perpetrator may have had access. That takes time because you're not just working on the one system, you're working across on other stores. Never mind USBs that are in a desk drawer. And when they're in their office, they're connected. But you don't know that because otherwise the USB drive is in their pocket or it's in their desk drawer, or they have an external hard drive, or they have a Dropbox and they just upload, or they have a OneDrive and they just upload, or they have a Google Drive and they just upload, and they have an iCloud upload, and they happen to be OCD, obsessive compulsive. So they have all of those things and they upload multiple copies anywhere and everywhere because they're just a little, you know, little off bubble. Those things can happen, right? You need to have an understanding of, you have to constantly refine your search. And this, again, can take days or weeks. And you can, like the FBI, try to get stuff off of an iPhone for 2 assassins who slaughtered California government workers at a Christmas party a couple of years ago. And the FBI wanted access to the encrypted data on iPhones, and Apple denied their access because what the FBI requested was the magic key to decrypt all iPhone data instead of that iPhone data. And it became a really bad problem because, well, the only way that Apple support could help was to use their magic key, which is designed to work on all iPhone data. We think that since that time, there's been like re-engineered or re-architected encryption scenarios for iPhone data in the cloud. I'm not sure, I haven't kept up with it lately, but that's another topic for interesting research. So one of the things that you have to do in a corporate or organization, if there is such a thing as a SIEM, everyone, SIEM, Security Event and Incident Management System. It's a centralized store of logs from all devices and systems, right? Or selected devices and systems. This may be a godsend in scenarios like this, where you need to do some spelunking and you use SIEM data to identify patterns for maintenance, troubleshooting, and security activities. Because the data is stored outside the local device or system, it may be more reliable than local logs stored on a compromised device or system. Does everybody understand what we're saying here? So one of the things you might want to recover on a system are the system logs. And how do you do that for a live acquisition? Well, I'm so glad you asked that. You go to properties, and this is just one of the ways you can do it. You go to advanced system settings, and nope, that's not it. Computer management. Do we have the computer management? Oh, no. Here, I think in services, right? Don't we have something in services? There is a services, right? So, no, event management. Is there an event manager in here? Where's our event manager? Oh, you know, they moved the cheese. I think I'm just gonna type in event viewer. There we go. It's an app. I think I'm also gonna, I wanna see if computer management is, yeah, there it is. It's in here too. So if you get into computer management and you do event viewer, there you go. Everybody see this? So did you know that if you're working a live acquisition, ooh, warning. Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna check that out live in class, but let's say I want to capture that. I can, ooh, well, so this is what bad people would do. They would clear the log. There was a simple export option. Where are we? Saved log, create a custom view, clear log, filter, properties, save all events as. Does everybody see that? Yeah, I was looking for an export option. Might be an older version of server operating system I'm trying to get. So let's put this in the temp folder on my C drive, just so you can see that, right? I'm going to call this my what? What is this? System? System log. Zorg. And what's the date time? 28 March. Why am I doing this? Oh, I don't know, because it's good to tag things with sensible names. Display information, sure. I don't want all available languages. We're not going there. Okay, so it's saved. So now if I go into here and I close this and I close that, I should be able to go in here and later on when I'm interested in analyzing, I should be able to double click on this in my research system, and there I would have my log information, right? Including my warnings that I just saw, which again, the LSO was triggered. I got to figure that one out. All right. Any questions before we close out for the day? I did want to do a deep dive to finish out this section because there's a whole lot more to the level 5 or grouping, group 5 of data, in particular because of alternate stores of data and where logs may be stored elsewhere. Do we have 2 more minutes? Okay, remember in our last module, you had a taxonomy of tools, right? It's updated. So you want to get into there, and then there's a YouTube video on which tools to use for which scenarios. I wonder if that's one of mine or somebody else's. Is that?
Hello, everybody.
Oh.
Today we're going to
be someone else's
doing acquisition using Guymager.
Yeah, that's actually a good one to watch because coming soon to a screen near you, you're going to be using Guymager to acquire disk data to create a forensically sound copy of a disk image. And that's what you're going to do. So that's a good thing to watch. And then when we talk about Wireshark sniffers, one of the things that you have to remember, and I think we mentioned this when we were talking about tools last module, if you're working live acquisition as a part of incident handling, you remember that you do need a span port, and you're going to need to coordinate with IT departments if there isn't one readily available. And the device that is running Wireshark needs to have the network interface in promiscuous mode in addition. So the platform that's performing the Wireshark capture has to be in promiscuous mode. It has to be connected to a span port on the network where other traffic from other ports and MAC addresses are mapped to that single port. So it's usually a very high capacity, like 10 gig connection if people are using 1 gig connections, right? If you're folding 100 different 100 meg Ethernet connections into one port, you're going to need a very big pipe. So that's just one thing to think about when you're doing live acquisition for network scenarios. And okay, so there's additional information in the addendum. Be sure that you start looking at the addendum. We will take up the balance of our content review for this module on Thursday. Given the material that's been presented, are there any questions or comments or observations? Going once. Yeah, it's good to be back in the classroom. All right,